What's up, guys? Welcome back to Newswave. So there's a lot of anticipation heading into this week because there's an Nintendo Direct expected right at the end of this week. And with that, rumors naturally are flying around, and one from a source that's kind of gained more and more notoriety, it seems, over the last week or so. And in fact, with this latest rumor, people are just throwing out all kinds of guesses around the number 7. Well, we'll go over that here today. Also, we are going to be talking about Knight Silksong because it's absolutely taken over online since it released last week. And with this is coming all kinds of controversies and conversations around pricing and difficulty and a range of other things that we'll take a look at. And we'll also be talking about Sonic Racing Crossworlds coming up here pretty soon, and a recent leak online seems to show that maybe Sega has even more plans for revivals and would use Sonic Racing to help elevate that. All of that and more, guys. If you enjoy these videos, make sure you hit that like button, helps out a ton, and if you're new here to the Spawnwave channel, make sure you subscribe down below. And of course, members for the channel do get Newswave early. If you would like to learn more about that, click the join button or link in the description down below. And we're going to start today with Pragmata. That is coming out next year from Capcom, and there have been some similarities drawn between this game from what's been shown so far and the Mega Man franchise. In fact, some think that it takes place in the same universe, or maybe Pragmata is working to build up even to a new Mega Man game or something. It's basically their way to do a red herring revival release for Mega Man, and then at the end, oh, okay, there's the Blue Bomber. Well, we have a comment now from the director at Capcom on this game. We can see this over on VGC, where he says Pragmata is not a Mega Man game. It is a completely new game from Capcom. I was actually one of the producers on the Mega Man Battle Network Legacy Collection as well, so I'm happy to see that people who love Mega Man are passionate about Pragmata too. From my standpoint, it's nice to see people are being so positive about it. I think there's also that sense of people who are Mega Man fans are like, maybe this, we are to the point where we're seeing things now. That's just kind of where it is with the Mega Man fan base to that. Yes, I understand you look at some of the stuff in Pragmata, especially the robot girl that's right there as one of the main characters, right? And even some of the theming and color schemes and stuff around her, it does look kind of Mega Man themed. But I think, once again, a lot of us who would like to see a new Mega Man game are just starting to see it everywhere, and seems like Pragmata might be the case for that too. Also, it looks like a patch is incoming for the Switch version of Shinobi. This we can see over on the Sega official account, saying in response to feedback from all players, we're currently developing an update patch to improve the screen resolution in the Nintendo Switch version of this title. Please wait a little longer until the patch is released. So with Shinobi on the Switch, especially when you play on the Switch 2, in handheld mode specifically, it's quite blurry in handheld play with that screen. Now, you're taking a Switch 1 resolution, blowing it up even further to the 8-inch screen on the Switch 2. So I don't know if they would then go back and say, let's raise the max resolution to 1080p, because then it'll work backwards compatible on the Switch 2. And if playing on the Switch 1, the dynamic resolution will pull it down anyway. Maybe that's the strategy. I mean, I would just like to see a Switch 2 version of this game, but who knows when it comes to dev kits, they seem to be all over the place with that situation. But at the very least, let's get that resolution figured out for Shinobi on the Switch and Switch 2 in handheld mode, because that game is too good to just be completely Vaseline affected. Oh, and it looks like we may have a little hint towards what Bend Studio is working on next after their recent live service multiplayer game was canceled alongside of Blue Point's God of War multiplayer game being canceled. Now we can see this job listing. This was noticed over on Tech4Gamers, and we can see the requirements with the highlight, experience with multiplayer game development and design. And look, I saw people immediately go, oh, they're doing it again. Here comes the live service game. And I can't rule that out. I mean, absolutely, they could have said, oh, what are we gonna do? We have this one canceled, didn't cross certain milestone. We'll get another one greenlit. That shouldn't be too hard, as Sony is still looking to do live service stuff. But I will say it is possible. Maybe they just want to do a more traditional, it sounds crazy to say now old school, but old school setup for multiplayer, where it's not something that has all these components for live service. Maybe it is a tacked on multiplayer game for a single player game. Is that me mostly coping around that? Probably. But I think it'd be a better strategy than to keep trying the live service games for a studio that maybe isn't quite up to the task for that. And guys, with some of the quick news out of the way, let's get into the bigger stuff. Let's start right away with this apparent Nintendo Direct that is happening on Friday the 12th. At least that's the running theory right now. However, Nate and many others, including VGC, have come out and backed up Switchforce on the claim that at the end of this week, we will see a Nintendo Direct of some kind. I say of some kind because while the expectation right now is a general Nintendo Direct to really close out this year, coincide with the Tokyo Game Show, TGS, and then also maybe work into the Mario anniversary. It does sound like it would be quite a packed show, but because of what happened here with Switch Force, where they mention this date on Friday, well, they're getting a bit more eyes, especially with different publications, and I have many people sending me some of these different reports around this. One in particular kind of left it up to just interpretation. Is like, okay, what do you think it could be if we say there's a certain number of games out there, or games, or numbers in games? Like, so, for example, you can see this. This is over on My Nintendo News, one of many publications that people sent me. Switch Force is in it at 3 mysterious 7 games for next Nintendo Direct. Essentially, 7 release titles, or games with 7. That's kind of the theming here. 3 different games that would revolve somehow around the number 7. Okay, so people, of course, went from there and just started throwing everything at the wall and see what stick. All right, so all kinds of guesses. And I have a few guesses too. Now, apparently this has nothing to do with Professor Layton. That was immediately like snuffed out right there. Nope, no Professor Layton. Okay, so the other one was Black Ops 7. Apparently that's not the case. So from there, I started to think a bit, and I was like, well, what would be weird to go around 7? Because obviously, one of them, I assume, is Final Fantasy VII Integrate that will get its release date. That makes sense. There you go. There's one of the 7s. The other ones, let's say Yakuza 7 Like a Dragon. I mean, we see Sega and RGG starting to make more and more of a push over to Nintendo's platform, not only with the Switch 1, but most recently we saw Yakuza 0 Director's Cut on the Switch 2. So Yakuza 7 Like a Dragon, their turn-based RPG, they released their first foray into that genre and playstyle. That, I think, would make a lot of sense on the Switch 2. The other one that would be kind of funny to see, because it would be kind of random, Resident Evil 7, and I say random because you feel like they would go to Village, but okay, sure. Bring over 7, and then maybe also Village. There you go. That would work, right? And I also picked Killer 7, because why not? That would absolutely be out of left field. The one that I think would be really cool to see would be Dragon Quest VII Remake. This has already been kind of discussed previously. Jason Schreier sort of threw it out there and mentioned, yes, it is a thing, and that 2026 was being targeted for that. At least that was the assumption a few months ago. And if it was coming out in 2026, you feel like they would want to announce, I don't know, around Tokyo Game Show 2025 in some sort of presentation. It could be at, say, a State of Play, but the Nintendo Direct does make a lot of sense for a game like that. Now, I will preface this by saying I mentioned remake. I don't think it's going to be a remake like Final Fantasy VII, where it's broken into 3 parts and they reimagine a lot of stuff. I think it's going to be more one-to-one, and maybe be closer to what we saw with Bravely Default as kind of a remastered thing, but maybe go a touch further. So that's kind of what I'm envisioning for that one. But either way, I think it'd be really cool to see Dragon Quest VII come up to modern platforms and get a whole nice section here during that Nintendo Direct. Otherwise, though, going into it, the big one, Metroid Prime 4, need the release date for that. I think that's obvious. Everyone knows that by now. But from there, we'll wait to see what Nintendo has to say about this Direct, because I feel like they're going to announce it 1 or 2 days in advance, and then we'll go over more of a solid list of predictions heading into it, especially if Nintendo at least gives us some indication as to what we can expect. I mean, if it's not a general Direct, that would throw all kinds of predictions out the window, but we'll see what they have to say when it comes to length of the Direct, how long is it, and if they tell us, oh, for games coming out later this year or into the future, maybe for 2026. Next up, let's talk about Knight Silksong, which easily cleared 500,000 concurrent players on Steam over the weekend, and we saw it take down all kinds of storefronts, Nintendo, Steam, we saw PlayStation, Xbox apparently was struggling. I didn't experience that as much, but it wouldn't shock me. And based on what we're seeing with the sales charts, I have a feeling that the sales are very good for Knight Silksong, because it is a $20 game as an example on the eShop, so that is revenue tracked, as in for every $60 game, Knight Silksong has to sell 3 copies to match up to that if, say, it topped the charts, and in fact, it did. So yeah, a lot of copies are selling for Knight Silksong, but because of all this interest, right, all the sales, all the money flowing in for this game, there are a lot of questions right now that are coming up, mostly from other developers and studios. As an example, Knight Silksong had its release date announced 2 weeks in advance, and that threw the industry through a loop a little bit, as we did see games just kind of get delayed out, and just some frustration, we'll say, that it was shown online because of this. But the price point seems to be a thing that keeps coming up. $20 for this game is a problem for some. Now, look, okay, so let's take a look. This is one of the viral messages that went around online. And this is from Lone Fungus, who says, as a dev making a smaller Metroidvania than Silksong, which I originally thought would be fairly priced at $20, what should I price it now? It'll be a 10 to 15 plus hours game, but it was made by one person with limited dev time and funds. I can't afford to give it away for free. My advice would be to sell it for $20. Here's the thing, right? Hollow Knight Silksong comes out, and I think people are looking at it as setting a new standard. And I just don't think that's realistic in the sense that there's only one Hollow Knight Silksong, like that's it. You're not going to see this constantly. I mean, it turned into a whole meme. There was the clown wig. It's not a consistent thing or a regular thing to see what Silksong has done over the last 6 or 7 years. It's just not. So it's almost like if you were a big AAA studio and you're just comparing yourself to GTA 6, because it's also a video game. So yeah, you're going to compare it, but Silksong is just, it's just not common. There's literally, it's one of one. There's one Silksong. So your game can come out and be 20, it could be $25. Animal Well came out last year, great game. Metroidvania, $25. Yes, it was in PlayStation Plus, but hey, Silksong was in Game Pass. So I think when you look at Silksong, you just go, hey, that's just a well-priced game. I mean, I'm 7 hours into it. I'm having a lot of fun. I think it's a very, very good Metroidvania game. Is it this incredible experience that I've never had ever before in my life? No, it's more Hollow Knight, which is fine. That's kind of what I was expecting going into it. But there is something else with the game that's coming up, the difficulty. Now, I will tell you, this game is harder, I think, than Hollow Knight. Okay, and some of that comes down to the bosses that do double damage than normal enemies. Well, because of this, there is a patch that's going around on PC currently that halves that damage back to normal for bosses. So yes, people are currently modding the game to make it a bit easier, and some are calling for difficulty settings. And my take on that is similar to my take for Souls games. Hollow Knight Silksong was created and designed with one difficulty in mind. That's it. And that's just how the developers expect you to play through the game, and that's fine. That's kind of like, for me, going through and saying that needs to have difficulty settings would be the vision of the game needs to be completely altered because it's too hard. And okay, look, that can be a thing for people, but the way it's again designed is that you learn the bosses, the patterns, the map, how you can sort of get around with the different abilities to beat a boss. Yes, getting good, but that sort of satisfaction that is usually built in, as we've seen recently over the last decade plus, to Souls-like games. So to me, it fits right in, and it's difficult, but it's not difficult to the point where I feel like I'm stuck on a boss for hours and hours and hours. You die a few times, you figure out the pattern, and then you go back and you just beat the boss. Okay, so with that in mind, for every developer out there right now who is struggling around the idea that Hollow Knight Silksong is taking up like the spotlight completely, it is. But if you have a game that's coming out right now, my advice is to make one of those congratulation art piece cards for Hollow Knight Silksong and put your character or your title or your game right next to it. So if your game is out in September, when it's about to come out, celebrate and congratulate Hollow Knight Silksong with their character and put it next to your character and make a whole marketing spiel out of that, because people are ready to like and retweet anything with Hornet and Hollow Knight Silksong in it. Next up, let's talk about Sonic Racing Cross Worlds. That's out here in a few weeks at the end of September. And I've never been super into the Sonic Racing games. I've played them, but Cross Worlds is gaining a lot of interest online, especially after the recent network test that they did. People seem really into this game, so I'll be checking it out when it releases. But there's something else that's going around currently, as it appears some of these guest characters are showing up online maybe a bit early. So, for example, we can see this is over on Insider Gaming, saying according to a Reddit post on the official Sonic the Hedgehog page, a user found a pre-order case for Sonic Racing Cross Worlds in New Zealand. On the back of the box art were models of the free DLC characters, like Dragon's Ichiban and Persona 5's Joker. However, one character was on there that hasn't been announced yet. Knights from Nights into Dreams. Now, this is just going to apparently be on the box art itself, according to this person who spotted this on the back of the box. So it's not necessarily something that I guess you're going to come across by random on in the game. I'm sure it's something that will be in their marketing here pretty soon as they lead up to launch. However, people are noticing, wait a minute, this looks like kind of a new rendering of Knights. So is there a new Knights game coming out? Because look, it makes sense to now use Sonic Racing Crossworlds, as I'm sure it will do pretty well in terms of sales, to maybe springboard some of your somewhat forgotten franchises like Knights. Okay, so the last time we had that was on the Wii, and I'm not like the biggest Knights person or anything, but it did catch my eye when it was on the Saturn, because one of my friends had a Saturn, I didn't, and whenever I went over there, I just thought the game looked super interesting and imaginative. Of course, while they were playing it, I would sit there and have to watch them play Knights. But either way, it is something that people who have history with the Saturn and Sega are probably really excited to hear about the potential for a revival there, considering Sega is all of a sudden becoming very interested in their own games to revive. Long dormant franchise. We just saw Shinobi, and that's done well. Jet Set Radio, from what's being said out there, I think that's going to come out and do pretty well, at least in terms of quality. So this isn't something Sega's phoning in, which is one of the reasons that if they take a swing at Knights, I think it's actually going to be a serious effort. So this is a great way, I think, to maybe even introduce the character to a younger generation who'll be buying into Sonic Racing Crossworlds here in a few weeks. So I guess keep an eye out for that, whether it's on the box art or maybe in a trailer for a reveal. And in our last bit of news, let's talk about Final Fantasy VII Part 3 and Kingdom Hearts 4. Yeah, I know, an actual Kingdom Hearts 4 mention. Not really a sighting, but maybe that's coming soon enough. Anyway, there was some discussion about this from Nomura, and of course this is going to come up when he's working with a live stream that's going on for Ever Crisis to see if maybe it would be linked to when we can expect to hear about the final or the concluding chapter, we'll say, of this trilogy with Final Fantasy VII. This we can see. This from CG Mag Online from Nomura. This was during the second anniversary news stream for Final Fantasy VII Ever Crisis, translated over on X, but we are indeed making a lot of progress with the game. We already have decided when we will make the announcement as well, and we will stick to that time schedule, so don't worry, but please wait for it. On that same note, I'm seeing a lot of comments on Kingdom Hearts 4. We are making great strides and going according to schedule. So I assume Kingdom Hearts 4 is going to sort of become that new Hollow Knight Silksong with the clown wig and stuff every time you go into a Tokyo Game Show or some kind of event that Square does or a State of Play. It's just kind of the way it'll be. But Final Fantasy VII Remake Part 3, I guess Part 3, we just got to figure out what the title is going to be for it, but this is a game that I think will come together a bit faster than people are expecting, since they've already made the world for Rebirth. They're clearly reusing a lot of assets and character models, so I kind of think this is a game that will get out, yes, before the PS6 gets here. Go figure, that should be the target, but maybe this is something we see at the Game Awards. Is that possible? Could Jeff Keighley lock down the first trailer for Final Fantasy VII Part 3 in a few months here to close out 2025, and maybe it has like a end of 2026 release, or that winter, maybe 2026, 2027 kind of window, because it would make sense for them to get it out maybe at the beginning of 2027 ahead of what is kind of going around maybe as a potential holiday 2027 PlayStation 6 launch window. So I'm curious to see the conclusion, because the game, now the two games, has gone all over the place. It's completely off the rails now, so I'm really interested to see how Nomura can try to make any of this be sensible at the end and tie it all together, because that sounds like it's going to be nearly impossible at this point with what they've done. And before we go to the comment of the day, we'll take a look at the poll that I posted up yesterday, where I ask, have you used a 3DS or 2DS this year? 52% say no. 48% though say yes. Now, this came to mind because I saw Nintendo had put out a post that said that they were out of parts basically to service the 3DS generation system, so they're just not going to be able to do that anymore. I guess under warranty, or just for, you can pay Nintendo to then fix your system, even if it's out of warranty. They're just out of parts, so that's kind of it. And that really can actually start to diminish the overall number of available systems out there. So it does feel like this could become that moment where, yeah, it's going to still be kind of a slow grind down for how many 3DS or 2DS systems are out there. But this is kind of where it really starts to decline a bit, where even Nintendo won't work on them anymore. So I was just curious to see how many people out there were still using it. And that's why I asked, have you used a VR headset this year, or a 3DS or a 2DS this year? Just see how many people are out there using it somewhat recently. And we'll finish up with the comment of the day, as you're seeing here. This is from Neil, who says, the Switch 2 Pro controller produces a sound similar to rain falling when it's raining in Silksong. Team Cherry also made sure that you could feel the rain pouring down with the HD rumble. Yeah, they did a really good job with the haptics in Silksong, and that is the cool thing. People do tend to forget that the motors in the Switch 1 and the Switch 2 can also produce sound All right, it's crazy to think, but yeah, remember with Mario Party, it was a whole thing where it's your turn and it makes a beep. And people were like, is there a speaker on this thing? No, just the way it can vibrate and create frequencies, it can make sounds. So with something like Rain, it makes a ton of sense. You do like a little pitter patter on all around the controller, and you have it give off certain frequencies and sounds to where it becomes really immersive. Those are the things that can elevate generational leaps. So going into, say, next generation, people have joked about the idea of smell-o-vision and stuff like that. Temperature changing controllers. These are things that these companies do need to think more and more meaningfully about, especially as we see just graphics kind of level off. Those leaps aren't really there as much anymore, but I still think there's a long way we can go when it comes to immersion with something like a controller. And ladies and gentlemen, that's going to do it here for Newswave. If you enjoyed this video, guys, hit that like button. If not, hit the dislike. Leave comments down below about everything we talked about here today. If you missed last week's Newswave, I'll leave it up here in a card. Or maybe you wanted to hear about like the most hated controller in history. That one coming from Xbox nearly 25 years ago. I did a video on that over the weekend. I'll leave it right below. Thanks guys for watching, and I'll see you next time.